Hi, and welcome back to this week's Parsha Shir on Sefer Or Gedalahu. We'll take a look at one small piece of the Or Gedaliahu's commentary on Parshas Vayeshev. In Parshas Vayeshev, we're introduced really to not just the names of the tribes, the children of Yaakov, as we were introduced to them in last week's Parsha and Vayetze, but really to their character, to their personality, to their traits, to the things about the way that they act in the world, the way that they find themselves, and more specifically, the way they interact with each other. Perhaps most importantly, we learn a lot about the nature of the character of Yosef, who would play such an important role as Jewish history unfolds and perhaps unravels in this week's Parsha and the Parshios to come. We learn about the way that Yosef thinks, the way he acts, and the way he interacts with his brothers. And one of the things that the Torah tells us, even before it gets to the parts about his dreams and what his dreams represent, perhaps what his aspirations are, the Torah sets the tone for the context in which Yosef operates. The Torah says, Eila Toldos Yaakov. These are the generations of Yaakov. And most specifically, it's important for us to know, Yosef ben Shvasre Shana Haya Ro'eh Echav Batzon. That Yosef, at this point in his life, was one of the important pieces of the constellation of Yaakov's family. He was 17 years old, and what he did for a living is he went out to shepherd along with his brothers out in the field to look after the livestock, the cattle, the flocks of Yaakov Avinu. That part of the pasuk makes sense. It tells us his job, it tells us his age, it tells us his relationship, which he was amongst his brothers. The end of the pasuk is what's a little bit challenging. Pasuk says very strangely, "Vehu na'ar es b'nei bilha ve'es b'nei zilpa neshei aviv." Nar generally means a young boy or a lad, young person of some sort. So what exactly is the Torah telling us here? Is nar here a noun, trying to define what Yosef is at this point in his life? He's a young kid. Or is it a verb? Hu nar es b'nei bilha es b'nei zilpa? Is he somehow na'aring, whatever that means, we'll see soon. Is he na'aring the other children of Zilpa and Bilha? What exactly is the word nar doing here in the pasuk? The Mefarshim struggle to understand what it has to do with anything. The Ibn Ezra actually says that the word nar is not a description of who Yosef was or of his age. It was actually a description of the way Bnei Bilha and Bnei Zilpa treated Yosef. Of course, Haya Ro'eh Echav Batzon means that when it came to the Bnei Leah, to his older siblings, he was grazing along with them in the fields. What his role was is unclear at this point in the pasuk. Is he overseeing them? Is he shepherding along with them? But somehow his role as a shepherd is very clear. However, when it came to Bnei Bilha and Bnei Zilpa, according to Ibn Ezra, Ba'avur heyoso katan, because Yosef was the youngest of all the siblings, Samu bnei hashefachos shamash lahem. The bnei hashefachos, the children of Bilha and Zilpa, made Yosef into a kind of servant, into a kind of helper, into a kind of worker that they could employ to do their task. Ki'im yisharet echa bnei hagvira lo haya davar ra. Because what harm would it cause for them to take their little brother and say, hey, do this favor for me, do this favor for me, run this errand for me? He was like a gopher for them. Nar here is a description of the way they treated him, the role that they gave him as a shamash, as a misharet, as a servant that they used to help him, which was not so nice, and perhaps this is what leads to the rest of the description that the Torah gives, Vayaves dibatam ra'al avihem, that he spoke negatively about them. He spoke negatively because they weren't treating him nicely. So that's the Ibn Ezra's approach. Others, like the Or HaChaim, explain that it is a description of Yosef, but it's not a description or a value judgment of Yosef in any way. It's not a description of his personality, of his traits, but rather simply a description of his relationship to Bnei Bilha and Bnei Zilpa because of his age. The Or HaChaim says, Ve'omro vehu nar, the reason the Torah points out that he is a nar, pirush, is to tell us, mizman heyoso nar, vehu miskorer mischaber im bnei bilha and bnei zilpa, that he was the youngest of the children. From the time he was a little boy, those brothers that he most associated with were the children of Bilhah and Zilpah. So the pasuk is telling us, Hunaris b'nei Bilhah b'nei Zilpah, he was closest in age to them, therefore he was most close with them as siblings. After all, it makes sense that after, especially after his mother dies, after Rachel dies, that someone has to take care of him, and one of the mothers would take care of him. And certainly it makes sense that the Shifcha of Rachel would take care of Yosef. So it's not altogether surprising that he would most associate with the Bnei Bilhah and even the Bnei Zilpah. Others, such as Rashi and the Sforno, Rabbeinu Bachai, who I'm about to mention, make nar, the word nar, into more of a big deal in this pasuk and actually into a value judgment about Yosef. Rashi famously says, Shahaya ose maase na'arus. Nar here is a description of Yosef not in terms of his age, but in terms of his behavior. He acted in a childish fashion. What was he doing to act in a childish fashion? Hayametaken besaro, mimashmish be'enav, kadeshi nira yafe. He was playing with his hair. He was fixing up his eyes, his face, so that he could look most beautiful. Yosef, we know, was a beautiful-looking man, and at 17 years old, he was preoccupied in almost a childish fashion with his external looks. The Sforno takes off from there and explains, Mipneina aruso chata lahavidi basechav, kilo nisa velo hitbonen la'acharis davar. He was acting in a childish fashion, perhaps not in the physical sense, as Rashi's saying, but he was acting in a childish fashion in terms of the way he reported about his brothers. He didn't think through every step of the way. What would happen if I went and I told my father that my brothers were doing X, Y, and Z, and if I reported every misdeed that they performed? He was in a childish, insensitive, non-thoughtful a stage of his life in which he wasn't thinking through the consequences of his actions. Osemase narus, just like Rashi was acting childishly, either Rashi in the physical sense or the Sforno, and perhaps the Maharal as well, in the deeper sense of not weighing his actions as carefully as perhaps an adult would, not anticipating the outcome of his actions that would lead to tremendous kina, vesina, tremendous jealousy and hatred, and the rest of the story that ensues in the Parsha. Rabbeinu Bechaye takes a bit of a different tact, also saying that the word nar is a value description of Yosef. It's a description of him being, based on Kabbalistic literature, kimase kruv, like the face of an angel, the face of a ministering angel, the youthful face of an angel, almost like the face of an angel that would be similar to the carvings on the Kisei HaKavod. In that sense, he was almost angelic in his look. Vehunar. So that's almost a positive description. The Or HaChaim says also, sorry, not the Or HaChaim, Or Gedalahu himself says, Gam yesh lefarsho shehu lishvach. There are other ways to interpret nar in the positive sense. Shenar hu milashon his orurus. The word nar perhaps derives from the word air, to be awake, to be alive, his orurus, like arousal of your spirit. Shahaya er l'chol davar, he was aware and sensitive to every issue. Ubechol matzav chadash nis orer ech lahagish el ha'inyan. Every new situation that came his way, he was acutely aware of it, able to react to it, be fresh, be conscious, be reactive to any situation that came his way, and perhaps adapt himself accordingly to every new situation. So you see here a mix of all kinds of interpretations of nar, some more positive, some more negative. And the Or Gedalahu concludes from this that perhaps they're not mutually exclusive. Perhaps he was a nar in the sense of his beauty, in the sense of the look of his face, the angelic look of his face, like Rabbeinu Bechaye. Perhaps he was nar, like Rashi says, making himself look very good, like almost in a childish fashion. Perhaps he was also air. He was very acutely aware of things. Perhaps it's a conglomeration of all of these traits associated with the word nar. And what does that mean about the character of Yosef? It means, al pi Kabbalah, the following. He says, habiur hu, the reason, the explanation for the coexistence of all these factors, as explained by the word nar, de midas tzadik tzarich birur, that the quality of a tzaddik, of a righteous person, which Yosef grew to be, requires birur. Birur is a word used in Kabbalistic literature to imply a spiritual process of clarification or of redeeming something over the course of time. Birur, to be mevarer, to really check things, to distill something to its end. It's a form of tikkun, a form of fixing, of working to separate perhaps the good from the evil over the course of time and separate things out. I think perhaps what the Or Gedalahu is pointing to is a very important principle about the nature of human beings. And that is that every trait which a human being has, in a certain way, is neutral until it's used for good or for bad. A person who's very smart could perhaps use his or her wisdom or his or her insight to help people, to make the world a better place, to construct things, to build cities and towers, to create scientific innovation, economic innovation, legal innovation, to try to help people and foster a better world around them. Or they could use their wisdom to trick people, to get around people, to cheat people. A person who is very funny could use their talent to go and help downtrodden people or depressed people or sick people to feel a little bit better, to bring some joy and some quality to their life. Or they could use their humor to make fun of people, to degrade people, to crash people down to the ground as opposed to elevating and then raising them up. A person who's wealthy could use their wealth in order to do tremendous good and to help people in need, or they could use their wealth to promote themselves and to try to show off and to be haughty and in ways that are really corrosive and corruptive. So every trait has the ability to be used for the good or for the not so good. Yosef is being described in our parsha as having the trait of nar. He had a narus to him. He had a young vigor to him, which came along with good looks and exceptional attentiveness to detail and an angelic looking face. He had all these qualities about him that were associated with the word nar. And the question is, how over the course of his lifetime was he going to be mevarer? Was he going to go through the process of birur, of taking that trait and distilling the negative tendencies he had because of that trait from the positive tendencies he had from that trait? How would he channel all of his quality as a nar to go in the right direction and ultimately become the tzaddik that he was destined to be? Would he use that quality for the good or for the bad? At this point in his life, perhaps he was still figuring it out. Perhaps he used that quality of leadership, that quality of his good looks and his exceptional character, perhaps his charisma that came along with it, perhaps his attentiveness to details and to people, to interpret dreams and to show that perhaps he understood the dreams better than anybody else. And maybe that wasn't such a good use of his quality, or maybe it was. He used that quality sometimes to perhaps rule over his brothers in a certain way, to show his superiority over his brothers in a certain way, which may not have been such a good thing. He's testing out the limits of his quality of a nar. In the end of the day, after he goes through this process of birur, this distillation, this tikkun, this fixing, this redemption of the quality of nar, and he teases out all the good from it, he's able to harness his quality of leadership and charisma and narus and ability to be attentive to details and to be excited and adaptive to everything that comes his way, to be the melech, to be the king in Egypt, to be the mashpir, the one who provides for his family, the one who protects his family, the one who moves Jewish history forward into the right direction. It's a challenge to each of us to think about the traits that we have, whether we are closely associated with the trait of nar, like Yosef was, or with other traits that we might possess, and how instead of saying we have X trait and therefore we're doomed to fail because this trait makes us fail, or we have this trait and we're bound to succeed because we have this trait, and eventually be disappointed by both outcomes, let's evaluate the traits that we have in a neutral fashion, seeing how we can work to activate those traits and move them forward in the right directions, to utilize those traits in order to foster good within ourselves and within the world around us. Shabbat Shalom.